There is a common thread in the stories we are told about enlightenment, about awakening. It often involves a peaceful scene, a quiet meditation under a tree, a sudden, blissful revelation. What gets talked about less, but feels more true, is the raw, grating, unmistakable texture of sandpaper, the searing heat of a forge, the sharp, sudden pain of a dislocated bone being snapped back into its socket. Awakening, it seems, is not a gentle unfurling, it is a realignment, and realignment requires a force that contradicts the current position. It requires friction. Pain, abuse, limitation, injustice, these are not cosmic errors or mere obstacles on a smooth path. From this vantage point, they appear as something else entirely, the essential, unrequested, and most effective teachers. They are the friction of contrast. Contrast is the palpable, often painful difference between what is and what could be. Without it, there is no traction. A wheel spins freely in air, but it cannot move a vehicle until it meets the resistance of the road. A fire needs the friction of a stick on tinder to spark. Will is not forged in the warm bath of comfort. It is tempered in the heat generated by resistance. The friction rubs away what is unnecessary, what is false, what is weak. It polishes the core by abrasion. Our deepest wounds, the ones that carve canyons into the psyche, are often the most precise indicators of our buried values. We don't discover a profound love for authenticity in a world that only ever praised us for conformity. We discover it in the suffocating pain of wearing a mask that never fit. We don't understand the value of peace while floating in a bland, conflict-free pond. We crave it. We define it. We recognize its priceless texture only after living in a cacophony of chaos or violence. The value of freedom is not written in ink. It is etched into the spirit by the experience of a cage, whether that cage is made of iron bars, societal expectations, or the tyranny of a loved one's will. This isn't about glorifying suffering. It's about recognizing its role as the definitive contrast agent. It is the black paint that makes the white line visible. The magic, then, lies not in being grateful for the pain itself, but in developing a gratitude for the contrast it provides. It's a gratitude for the undeniable, brutal clarity. The betrayal teaches us what loyalty means. The neglect teaches us the shape of the attention we truly need. The injustice carves out the exact contours of the justice we are now compelled to seek or to become. The friction shows us, with horrifying precision, what we are made of, and more importantly, what we are for. This understanding feels less like a modern self-help idea and more like an ancient, hard-won truth, whispered through time in the language of myth and metaphor. The enlightened masters of old didn't preach that the path was paved with roses. They embedded the necessity of friction into the very structure of their teachings. The Buddha's entire journey began with contrast. He was born Prince Siddhartha, immersed in the ultimate cradle of comfort, pleasure, and insulation, a palace designed to hide all friction. His father's map was one of perpetual bliss, but the friction found him anyway, in the form of the four sights: an old man, a sick man, a corpse, and an ascetic. The contrast between the map of eternal youth and health he'd been given in the territory of aging, sickness, and death he witnessed was so profound it shattered his world. That friction was the spark. It created the heat that propelled him out of the palace to seek an end to suffering. His enlightenment wasn't the avoidance of that friction, but the alchemical transformation of its fuel. In the Christian tradition, the metaphor is equally stark. The central icon is not a throne, but a cross, an instrument of extreme, state-sanctioned torture and execution. The story posits that the path to resurrection, to new life, leads directly through the heart of that suffering. The friction of betrayal, injustice, and physical agony is not a detour. It is the narrow gate. The transformative power is framed as emerging from that contrast, not in spite of it. The alchemists of medieval Europe, those proto-psychologists working with matter as metaphor for the spirit, codified this process. Their magnus opus, the creation of the philosopher's stone, required a process called the Nigredo, the blackening. It was the initial stage of putrefaction and dissolution, where the base material was subjected to heat and pressure until it broke down into a uniform, chaotic black mass. This was understood as a necessary death, a confrontation with the shadow, the friction that reduced the ego to its essential components before the subsequent stages of whitening and reddening could begin. No Nigredo, no transformation. Modern psychology echoes this ancient wisdom. Post-traumatic growth, a concept developed by psychologists Richard Tedeschi and Lawrence Calhoun, identifies a phenomenon where individuals who endure psychological struggle following adversity can experience positive change. This isn't mere resilience or bouncing back. It's a qualitative transformation, a deepening of relationships, a greater appreciation for life, new possibilities, personal strength, and spiritual development that would not have occurred without the seismic friction of the traumatic event. The contrast doesn't just restore, it rebuilds on a new foundation. Even the body understands this. The principle of hormesis in biology and medicine describes the adaptive response of cells and organisms to moderate, intermittent stress. A low dose of a toxin, a brief exposure to heat or cold, the micro tears in muscle from exercise. These forms of friction trigger an overexpression of protective and repair mechanisms, making the system stronger, more resilient, and more capable than it was before the stress. The system doesn't grow in spite of the challenge. It grows because of the challenge, because of the informational contrast that tells it the environment demands more. So this friction, this pain, this contrast, it isn't a sign that the spiral is broken. It appears to be the very mechanism of its turning. The raw material of a human soul is not shaped by gentle molding. It is shaped by impact, by pressure, by the heat born of resistance. Learning to be grateful for the contrast is perhaps one of the most difficult pieces of magic to master. It doesn't come naturally. The instinct is to recoil, to numb, to rage against the sandpaper. But there is a space, sometimes found only in hindsight, where the heat of the forge can be seen not as an enemy, but as the only force capable of turning separate, hard elements into resilient, unified alloy. The wound shows us where we are open. The limitation defines a frontier. The injustice draws the blueprint for a more equitable world in the negative space of its absence. The friction grinds away the illusions until all that is left is the unvarnished truth of what we value. what we will stand for, and what we are now irrevocably moving toward. The path isn't found by avoiding the rough grain of life. The path is revealed by it, one grading, clarifying, essential step at a time.